If all goes well, on the 18th of February 2021, the Perseverance rover will make a landing on the Red Planet and begin its historic mission of exploration and discovery. Now, this animation is from the Curiosity mission, but when it comes right down to it, the rovers are extremely similar. As a matter of fact, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, some of the parts from the Curiosity are actually spare parts being used for the Perseverance. But although this is kinda Curiosity 2.0, there's a whole bunch of new experiments on board, including a helicopter and also a sample return mission, or rather the beginnings of one. Many things that have folks very excited. But what SpaceX enthusiasts would like to know, and what's been talked about, is what is Perseverance going to do to help Elon Musk and SpaceX with their colonization ambitions? Is this rover going to help at all? Well, certainly any scientific mission to Mars is going to be helpful to Elon and to SpaceX, without a doubt, and Perseverance will be no exception. But we must remember that this is not the only mission going to Mars. As most of us know, there are actually three, one of which is being sent by the United Arab Emirates, and then this one, the Tianwen mission, which is being sent by the People's Republic of China. On July 23rd, a Long March 5 took Tianwen on its way to the Red Planet. And this mission is arguably the most ambitious of the three, certainly the most complicated of the three, and arguably the most likely to fail, given the fact that China has never been able to set a craft on the surface of Mars up to this point. It's also going to arrive later than the other two, with the lander not actually touching the Martian surface until sometime in April of 2021. However, if this mission is successful, and if it does set down in the location that the Chinese have chosen for it, it will prove more useful to Elon Musk and SpaceX than either of the other two missions. And this is not to suggest that Tianwen-1, as it is actually called, is better or has better technology or more innovative experiments on board or anything along those lines. No, it's more complicated than that, but it will prove more useful to SpaceX's plans, in my opinion, and I intend to show you exactly why that's the case in just a few minutes. Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Angry Astronaut. So, as I'm sure you were able to tell from the introduction, that we're going to be talking about the little-covered Chinese mission to Mars that will be arriving within the next few months, sometime in mid-2021, depending on when the Chinese decide to land on the surface after orbiting the planet for a while. It's a complicated mission. It involves not one vehicle, but three: an orbiter, a lander, and a rover. So there's quite a lot involved in it. And it's one of a number of expeditions that are on their way to the Red Planet. Everybody wants in on the game. Obviously, NASA is part of it with Perseverance, the United Arab Emirates and their Hope mission. Lots of folks seem very interested in the Red Planet and want to take advantage of this particular launch window in order to explore the this planet that seems to have attracted the entirety of the human race and get their own piece of the pie. But all of that having been said, which one is going to represent the biggest benefit to colonizing Mars, to SpaceX's long term objectives? Well, in the course of this episode, I hope to show you that it is actually the Chinese expedition that represents the greatest potential benefit. I'm not saying definitely. There's a lot of things that could go wrong with this. Obviously, Mars does gobble up expeditions. There have been a lot of failed expeditions to Mars. But nevertheless, if it is successful and it does land where it's supposed to land, this expedition could give Elon Musk a lot of information that the other missions are not giving him, especially Perseverance. And this has nothing to do with the technology involved. It's not saying that NASA is using inferior technology or inferior experiments or anything along those lines. It's all about location, and it's all about the purpose of the expedition. And we're going to get into detail about that and the impact that it could have on SpaceX's long-term plans right now. As many of you know, these are the proposed landing sites for the future SpaceX missions to Mars, at least the ones that they're taking the most seriously. And when you're talking about establishing a colony on Mars, it's location, location, location. And as you can see, the vast majority of them are on the right, between the Arcadia and Amazonas Planitia. Now, as you can also see, there's an exception. There's one on the extreme left, right here. Now, this location is the first intended landing site for the Chinese expedition, but we'll get to that in a moment. Now, there's a number of reasons why NASA recommended these sites. First of all, the altitude is low, making the atmosphere dense, giving protection from radiation, and on top of that, more carbon dioxide to be gathered to make fuel using the Sabatier method, which I have listed in the description. Now, the most important factor is the issue of water, and most probably there is quite a lot of water ice underneath these locations. Now, obviously, if you're going to build a city on Mars, you're going to need a lot of water. You're going to need water, obviously, for drinking, also for breathing, conversion into oxygen, also for rocket fuel, combined with the methane that you get from the carbon dioxide and the Sabatier method. Water is of incredible importance when we're talking about a large, self-sustaining colony. And as it happens, Tianwen is going to be setting down in the Utopia Planitia, that 9th location, which also, we suspect, has a massive amount of water ice beneath its surface, an area the size of Texas. Now, NASA suspects that there's quite a lot of water ice beneath the other locations as well, but the problem is we don't know exactly how much, and we don't know how deep it is or how difficult it will be to get to it. But the Tianwen rover has surface-penetrating radar designed to detect water ice as deep as over 100 kilometers, so it's going to get a really good picture of how much water ice we're dealing with in the Utopia Planitia and how accessible it's going to be. That's going to be invaluable information to SpaceX. Now, one of the reasons that SpaceX is concerned about this location, Utopia Planitia, is because it tends to be a little bit rugged, a little bit rocky, as you can see from this Viking photograph, which also coincidentally landed in this area as well. However, Tianwen can help with that too. Right before its landing, it's going to scan the region for an appropriate landing site, hovering at about 100 meters before it sets down. The Tianwen rover will then emerge and trundle about the environment, taking pictures with its navigation and topography camera, designed essentially to map out the area in extreme detail. This, of course, will be invaluable in finding safe future landing sites for the Starship, another big plus for this mission. In addition, this rover has instruments designed to determine the surface composition in great detail. Now, we've already done this in this region with the Viking lander, but this rover will travel about, gathering more information about the same region. So SpaceX will have a great deal of information about the surface composition and also the ice gained by two separate missions, whereas the Arcadia Planitia has yet to have a single spacecraft. Now, as we take a high-res orbital look at the Utopia Planitia, let's compare this with Perseverance. It's just the location, that's the main thing. The quality or the value of the experiments being performed don't matter. Perseverance is setting down in the Jezero crater, which is a long ways away from any of the SpaceX proposed sites, and for very good reason. This crater is in very rugged terrain. It's the most risky area that NASA has ever set down in, and they're doing it for good geological reasons. It's a worthy mission, but not nearly as helpful to SpaceX. Now, there's one very important exception to this, and that's MOXIE, an experiment on Perseverance designed to extract oxygen from CO2 using electrolysis. Now, if this experiment proves to be successful, that would be incredibly important to any colony. So we're not saying that Perseverance is useless, it's just not as useful. And by the way, I've only just gotten started. The Tianwen orbiter also has a high-resolution camera capable of resolving objects as small as 2 meters in diameter on the surface. This will also aid with mapping out safe areas for landings. It's also equipped with a spectrometer designed to determine composition both of the atmosphere and the ground, and methane has been described as being especially important. Because, as I think we all know now, the presence of methane, especially seasonal methane, strongly suggests the presence of life. And it is my opinion that this mission is designed to detect life for the first time. And what a huge propaganda boon that would be for the People's Republic of China. And by the way, I'm not the only one who thinks this. During my interview with Dr. Gilbert Levin, who is in charge of the life detection experiments on the Viking spacecraft, he told me that he suspects that the Chinese have a life detection package on board their rover, which is designed to prove or disprove the existence of life, giving the Chinese the ability of beating NASA to the punch. And you don't have to take my word for it. By the way, do you have any knowledge as to whether or not the Chinese lander has anything along these lines?
Which lander?
The Chinese lander that's due to.
They have not said, and it's my feeling that perhaps they included an experiment like the LR, and they're going to announce the detection of life.
So they'll be able to take credit for it first. Now, of course, if something like this does happen, it would be an utter travesty and a disservice to the legacy of this brilliant man and his experiments that were carried out way back in 1976. But nevertheless, this would help SpaceX in two important respects. First of all, the discovery of life, or the alleged discovery of life, would start a veritable gold rush of expeditions to Mars to first of all confirm the Chinese claim, and second of all to study this life in detail, which means that NASA and just about every other scientific organization on the planet would help Elon Musk get to Mars as quickly as possible. He would have a sudden dearth of investors. And for those of you who think that the discovery of life on Mars would prevent SpaceX from going because of governmental concerns about contamination, I can say with a certainty that the communist Chinese would not give a damn about things like that and set up a manned expedition to Mars to further their experiments and confirm their discoveries as quickly as they possibly could, in which case NASA would have a choice: either stand up for their foolish principles or get to Mars before the Chinese. I think they would choose the latter. So what's Tianwen gonna do to make this a reality? Well, just about everything, from subsurface ice to safe landing zones to the possibility of life being discovered. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention that subsurface radar will also be able to determine if there are caves and lava tubes in the area, which there very well could be. This is Elysium Mons, right at the edge of the Utopia Planitia, and it's a mere 12.2 kilometers high, or 50% taller than Mount Everest, a baby by Martian standards, but an incredible volcano by just about anybody else's standards. And its lava flows might very well have created lava tubes in the area for use by Martian colonists. And look, I'm not sitting here and bashing on Perseverance. I think that it's a fantastic rover and it's going to make some amazing discoveries. But the fact of the matter is that this location is not an ideal spot for colonization, whereas this location is. And the Tianwen mission is perfectly set up for a future base and future colonization. It's almost as if they had that idea in the first place. So there's a lot of what ifs that we need to discuss when we're talking about the potential benefits that the Chinese could bring to SpaceX. What if they choose not to share their information? I find this to be a bit unlikely simply because I think that the Chinese, for propaganda reasons alone, are going to want to declare to the heavens all of the accomplishments that they have made on the red planet. So I don't think that's necessarily going to be a problem. What happens if the Chinese mission fails? Well, if that's the case, then obviously they're not going to bring any benefits whatsoever. What happens if they feed SpaceX false intel? It's possible. However, any intel that they give to SpaceX that's obviously incorrect, and both we and the ESA have orbiters that could confirm a lot of what they're telling SpaceX, at least in terms of safe landing zones, where major obstructions are, that sort of thing. Those sorts of things can be confirmed by our orbiters. So if false intel is being given out, that's something that will become apparent very quickly. The one thing that I am concerned about is the fact that the Chinese mission seems to be oriented very much towards future colonization, that they are trying to locate water. They're exploring an area that's good for colonization, good for landings, good for setting up habitation, that sort of thing. That they are looking towards the possibility of long term colonization themselves. And even if it isn't as ambitious as SpaceX's is, there is another thing to consider. The Chinese have free access to nuclear weapons, and SpaceX is not going to have that advantage. So, if the Chinese choose to not play nice, if they establish some sort of base on Mars and want to start flexing their muscle, if things continue to deteriorate between the United States and the People's Republic of China, that could represent a really serious problem if the Chinese decide to bring nuclear weapons to Mars. It's kind of a terrifying scenario, hopefully an unlikely one, but nevertheless one that should be considered if they do indeed have these ambitions as well. And it's also something that makes the sense of urgency which Elon Musk is demonstrating towards getting the Starship to Mars, that much more important. There is a huge sense of urgency in getting to Mars first. Anybody who establishes a colony there first is going to have a massive strategic advantage over anybody who arrives there second. Now, naturally, I don't like to think of things in terms of potential future conflict, of taking conflict into outer space. I've always been against that. But given that the Chinese Space Agency is part of their military, it's something that needs to be considered, and hopefully something that we never have to face. All of that having been said, the infamous coffee cup still here. I'm still using it, and it is still contaminating my set, and it needs to go. I'm at 22,000 subscribers now. Thank you so very much. I need to get to 40,000, and I know that we can do it. Let's just keep on moving forward. In the meantime, if you want to continue to see unconventional content like this, I don't think a whole lot of people are making videos about this particular topic. You know how to support me. It's all in the description. I would be very appreciative of any kind of support, even if you just throw me a like and a sub. In any event, until we find out what the Chinese and indeed all of our missions to Mars have to offer, all of the discoveries they might make, and hopefully everybody shares with everyone, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.